Welcome to Ruxmalls and Oval Balls, and we are at episode 11 of the fans' favourite podcast, talking about everyone's favourite topic in the world, and that is rugby union. And I'm joined, as always, by the man, the myth, the legend, that is Rory. Rory, say hello to the listener.
Hello, listener. Welcome back. Legs 11. We're well into double figures now.
I know, we are flying. But before we start flying, we have to play the song. Everyone, buckle up. We're about to have a great episode. Enjoy the song.
Ruxmalls and oval balls, union their domain. Lots of rugby knowledge, but their banter is mundane. Rory answers questions, David has his stats. Two former front row voices, the fans own coal and flats. The DPRFR, welcome more jouet. Playing wide, out the back, alley, alley. Alley, alley. R-M-O-O-R-M-O-B.
I'm still not bored of that song, Rory, and I don't think I'll be bored of that song when we get to episode 111. I don't know about you, but every time I listen to it, it just brings a smile to my face.
It just gets the people up and dancing. It's just one of those.
It is, and every function I attend from now on, I will be bringing it on a hard drive, and I will enforce any DJ to play it.
If you would like the RMOB song to be your down the aisle music at your wedding, please let us know.
Absolutely. We are that shameless. We would do that at a heartbeat. But let's not get distracted. Let's not get too excited. We have some mundane banter to cover before we can get too excited about anything. So, Rory, what have you got this week?
Well, it was a good weekend. It was a great weekend to watch rugby. I actually went to Richmond Rugby Club, where I watched most of the games. Saw a bit of Richmond against Plymouth. It's a lovely club as well. Nice big function room, lovely long bar, reasonable prices on the Guinness, very key on a Super Saturday.
Fantastic.
But a great Saturday had by all.
Wow. So you'd strongly recommend Richmond Rugby Club?
I would absolutely recommend Richmond Rugby Club for a day out. Well worth the trip. Even in National 1, it was a fantastic little bit of rugby to watch. How about you, David? What's been going on in your world?
Well, first of all, I have an apology to make to the listener, because officially there is now 5% less of me to give to the world. Because in my Man vs. Fat rugby group club that I'm part of, I officially hit the 5% club. That means I've lost 5% of me.
Wow.
Which means I have 5% less of me to give. So,
just think, when they take the gallstones out, you'll lose another 5%.
Oh, at least. I'm going to be an absolute shell of a man. Quite a large shell, but you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just feel bad. There's 5% less of me to go around, and I just feel like I might be shortchanging the listener.
Well, to the 5% of listeners who will now no longer be able to get around David, we can only apologise.
Oh dear. Also, in Man v Fat rugby news, first round of fixtures for Team Black this week. It seems that maybe I might be the curse, because we had another resounding defeat. I'm still struggling, it seems, to rally the troops to be on the same page as me. Perhaps I should be focusing more on the team than myself. Maybe that's a bit of reflection I've had. But
you've got to be one of those glue players, David.
Yeah, I've got to be a glue player rather than a maverick. And unfortunately, the legend of the pulled quads are still causing me a bit of bother, because I still can't quite pull off a full 100% sprint without significant pain. So maybe I need a week off. Let the hams recover.
You're so famous for your 100% sprints as well. It's just a shame that people aren't getting to see you grace the paddock with them.
I really hope to show the listener one day that over 3 meters, explosive stuff. But that brings us to a close on Mundane Banter. I feel we've filled the brief sufficiently. let's talk about what we've got ahead of us, because we're in a bit of a transition period, Rory, because we've come to the end of the Six Nations, so we're going to summarise that. We're going to give what we think our team of the tournament is, maybe talk about some of our favourite moments of the tournament or some key standout moments, and then we're going to move on to the Premiership Rugby, which comes back this weekend, thick and fast. And then there's also the PWR final, there's the Premiership Rugby Cup we could touch on, the Under-20 Six Nations. Obviously, we're going to do the DPRFR segment, and we have some questions for Q&A this week. So we are going to be hard-pressed to fit as much rugby information in as we can in this beautiful, beautiful podcast of ours. Now, Rory,
my tits are already dancing,
look at that. Oh, for the listener who isn't aware, Rory is adorned a lovely, lovely royal blue England cricket jersey that was just bouncing around the screen as he is flexing his pectoral muscles.
It's great stuff. It's great visual stuff for an audio medium.
It is.
And I have worn the cricket jersey in honour of the scoreline that it reflects.
Oh, I look forward to getting to the match I believe you're referring to. But that is how we're setting up this podcast, and that is how we're going to start. We're going to start with the Six Nations, Rory. Let's try and do a summary of the matches that filled Super Saturday, which was a fantastic festival of rugby to watch. But let's start in order. Let's start with Italy versus Ireland. Give me your thoughts.
My overriding thought of this is it's a little bit what could have been for Italy. They played some fantastic stuff. There's a couple of things to cover, I think, in terms of what they were trying to do with the ball. Their defence was absolutely ferocious. But losing, I think it was Lamb, Cannoni and Negri in the first half, and then Pajarello quite early into the second half fall to injury, as well as Vincent's red card, it took the game away from what I think they were building towards, because before those injuries all really started to hit, I think they had the measure of Ireland, and I think they were in a real moment of clarity in terms of the way they were trying to play the game, really putting Ireland back on the back foot. I don't know what you thought, but I reckon if I was one of the men in green coming off that pitch, I would think we might have got away with one there.
Yes, relief, I imagine is what they felt. I completely agree. When you put that backdrop to it, that they had those injuries, their entire back row was effectively swapped and changed in the first half because of that, and the red card. And then you reflect on what the score ended up being. Definitely feels like one that's got away for Italy of kind of a real memorable victory that could have been. And they were playing like they could have done it as well. I thought they were playing some really good stuff. And if I'm honest, Ireland didn't impress. I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw from Ireland in that game. It feels like, are we watching the start of Ireland transitioning from what is a great team to becoming just a good team?
I'm not ready to write them off just yet, because you've still got to factor in the strength of the Leinster pathway in particular. You know, they've been questioned in the past about replacing great players, you know, Bod, Paul O'Connell, Ronan O'Gara, Johnny Sexton, you know, and they find ways to get players in that are as good, if not better, in some cases. So I'm not ready to say that Ireland aren't going to continue the level of success they've had in the last 8 years in particular, probably 15 years if you wanted to go all the way back to 2009. So I don't know that we've got enough data to suggest that just yet, but the question marks haven't gone away from them yet. You know, I think what they'll reflect on in this tournament is actually they had a really good game against Scotland when they were absolutely dominant. The second half against England, they were absolutely dominant. And then other than that, I think they flattered to deceive. And
I also think in this game, if you take away their rolling maul, which was basically their only weapon, they felt quite blunt in attack. There wasn't anything overly concerning from an Italian perspective, I'll say. They kept James Lowe very quiet. Mac Hansen looked dangerous.
I would say, Mac Hansen was going to be the point. I think the rolling maul plus Mac Hansen were the two main weapons for them. I did wonder watching it when James Crowley pulled out. I was like, do they teach all of their fly halves just to do the Sexton loop?
Yeah.
Because that does seem to be the primary point of attack for them in the back line.
Well, I imagine it's the Sexton playbook that's taught through all of the academy structures in Ireland, and if you deviate from that, you get dropped immediately.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Look, they still got that continuity. You could see that, I mean, particularly for the first try, where they're just relentless pressure on the goal line. It was, they've still got that ability to suffocate you in attack until they get over the line. So the structures are still there. I guess the question is whether some of the players are aging past the point where they can do that effectively against younger, fitter, stronger players, and whether they've got the players to come in to replicate that. Because the Italians were ferocious in defence. They were really up for it. I mean, there's a lot of players you could name to it, but Menoncello, once again, I mean,
amazing.
Menoncello's post-contact meters in attack are phenomenal.
Yeah,
he just gets go forward. I mean, even against the likes of Bundy Aki and Robbie Henshaw, who are big guys, he was still making meters from standing starts at points.
Yeah, it made me wonder, does Menoncello get into the World 15 in the 12 shirt?
I can't think of... I mean, look, South African fans will scream at us if we don't point out Damien Dialende, who does a very similar job for South Africa. But he's certainly in the top 2 or 3, if not the top 12 in his...
I think he's the best in the Northern Hemisphere, for sure.
We probably missed the opportunity to see him up against Tuipulotu, who would probably put his hand up for that. Jonathan Danty, obviously injured for France as well, who's been very strong for them in the last few years. Mo Farner, I think, has done a fantastic stint at 12 for France in this tournament. But all that aside, I mean, you'd struggle to argue that he's not the best in the Northern Hemisphere, if not the world, because he's just got all the attributes you'd want. Big. I mean, he's got to be 6'4".
Yeah.
Big, strong bloke. He's got the pace of a winger. He's got lovely, dexterous hands. Hits like a bull in defence. I mean, he put in some amazing shots. The one on Caelan Doris
sticks in the memory, that tackle on Doris. That he felt that
he tried to walk it off, but you could really see that one got to him.
Yeah,
and then Breck's on his shoulder, who's obviously not quite so big, but he's a solid and he's just a clever footballer, and he just picks great lines. He's got great hands. And his decision making is phenomenal,
and huge work rate as well. He's just everywhere.
Yeah, he is. I mean, you'd want him to be 5 years younger to get this partnership going for 2 World Cup cycles.
Yeah.
But hopefully they've got the players coming through to fill the gap as and when he bows out. So that's an area of your expertise. I'm sure you've got some people you can think of. The Italian side, so I think there's a couple of things that stuck for me and where I do think they fell short, and I think it's probably why they are falling short in games. I don't know if it's a confidence in attack or it's just a case of how rarely they're able to get consistent go forward balls and consistent line breaks in attack, but they don't anticipate line breaks well enough, I think, at the moment. Pajarello got a couple of line breaks. He didn't have anyone on the shoulder. Menoncello got one where they should have scored the second try. Brex was on his shoulder naturally, but there wasn't enough people flooding through because they could have scored that in one phase. So I think there's something in how they develop next in terms of their attack, and then the strength of the overall squad. I mean, actually, I think their bench was pretty loaded and it was pretty good. But I'm a massive fan of Stephen Varney. Obviously, Gloss alumnus. He had some excellent games for us, and he's a really good player. But is he the player to come on and spur a team on and steer a team to a victory in a top level test against someone as good as Ireland? Possibly not. We spoke about it before. I think 9 is probably their position of weakness, and then also the necessity to have Tommy Allen in the team, who's and this is no disrespect to Tommy Allen, who I think is a really good player, a really tidy player, but having him at fullback, you lose a bit of dynamism. Having to put Capawatso out onto the wing to accommodate that so that you get Tommy Allen's kick in. It takes something away from what would otherwise be a really potent back line. I think it's when Maran came on, how dangerous he can be. Another big player, quick. If you could have him on one wing with Ioane and Capawatso at fullback and rely on Garbisi's goal kicking, that back line suddenly starts to look really potent across the whole sort of 7 players. So they've got some work-ons, but we've talked about it. I still believe this is the foundational side for Italy to really kick on as a top-tier test nation.
Yeah, as we have said on numerous occasions, we wholeheartedly believe this is just building the foundations for that golden generation that's coming through. And I know there are certainly some good players coming through. So it's going to be interesting watching how Italy develop year on year. I think in this fixture, I think for both teams, it's just kind of put a very mute full stop to this tournament for both Ireland and Italy. I think for both sides, it's not a tournament they're going to want to dwell on for too long. Italy won't be overly happy with finishing 5th. Ireland probably won't be very happy with finishing 3rd, even though it was 1 point behind 2nd and 2 points behind 1st. I do think both teams will probably be already looking forwards rather than try to worry too much about how that tournament went.
Yeah, and I hope, from Italy's perspective, I hope they're able to go. I'm not sure who they're touring in the summer. They don't often get the biggest tours, so I'd have to have a look in that. But hopefully they're able to take a good squad away in the summer, develop their attacking play, and target a couple of the tests in the autumn as well for that. I know the Six Nations is the be all and end all for Italy, right? That's what their yardstick is as a development of the nation. But if they can start turning themselves into a 12-month team, I think that's a good step for them.
Yeah, I agree. So the game itself ended 22-17, so only 5 points in it. Ireland coming away with a bonus point win at the end of the day. Again, their place kicking not great. Dan Sheehan getting a hat-trick. So all credit to Dan Sheehan for picking that up, although some of that partly down to a very dominant rolling maul. But Italy definitely played their part in this fixture and really showed that they aren't just here, put that 70-point drubbing behind them. So I'd say credits to Italy, probably the moral victors of the day, but, the actual victors were Ireland. But let's move on to the game I think you've worn your cricket jersey for. Wales versus England at an absolutely buzzing Principality Stadium, at least at the start of the game. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was great to see the atmosphere build like that, right? I realised that the stuffing's been knocked out of them a bit over the course of the day, but it felt like there was a bit of optimism left in Welsh rugby. Obviously, they beat the under-20s that we'll talk about the night before, so I think there's a little bit of a buzz of the green shoots coming through below. But I wore a cricket jersey because this was a cricket score, and this was one of those games where we can dissect a lot of the attacking play and a lot of things that England did really good ball in hand. But this one boiled down to England was just so physically dominant in everything they did.
They were
the dominance, the post contact meters and attack, and really set the tone early on. Poor Jack Morgan, who's been carrying this team on his back for this whole tournament and for large parts of his Test career, frankly. But in that, before the first try for Itoje, Tom Curry coming around the peel off the maul and running over the top of him, you just thought, this is ominous.
Well, this is when you looked at the team sheet, you've got both Currys and Ben Earl to start off with. It's basically Jack Morgan versus 3 of the best fetchers in Northern Hemisphere rugby. He was always going to struggle to impose himself at the breakdown, and I do wonder if that was the reason for that selection, because it completely nullified his ability to steal ball, which was one of the main things he's been really good at this tournament.
Yeah, I guess a recognition from Borthwick that if you take away the real strength, maybe the only strength in that Welsh pack at the moment, which is their ability at the breakdown, if you look back at the Ireland game, they really competed hard there. Then actually, do they have the tools to hit you elsewhere? And the answer, no, unfortunately. So I don't want to keep putting the boot in on Wales because it's a tough result for them to take. It's obviously a record defeat at home. And it's obviously against their biggest rivals. So in a lot, I feel for the Welsh public on this one, because it's one of those results that's just it's a tough pill to swallow, and you're just going to have to hope that things improve from here. So I suppose it's probably kinder of us to just focus on what England did.
I agree, but I would also say Blair Murray for me is a bit of a shining light for Wales at the moment, because his performances at fullback continue to impress me, even in a team that is struggling to impose itself. He continues to kind of stand out as a elusive, dangerous player that you can't take your eye off. So there are little glimpses still of positivity for Wales, but I agree, let's not kick them when they're down. Let's focus more on the England performance, which I think contributed to this record scoreline, because this was a fantastic performance from this side, and I think we should give them the credit they deserve.
Yeah, every player there to a man deserves their flowers for that performance. But I would like to doff the cap to Borthwick on this one, who's obviously at points in this tournament had a bit of a rough ride from pundits and fans. I mean, we've not put the boot in overly, but we questioned some of the stuff, particularly after the Scotland game. Actually, if you're being really generous about it, you'd say this is the culmination in a strategy of evolution on the team that Borthwick have been put in place for a while. That I think you can maybe overplay that a little bit, and that might be, looking back on it with rose-tinted glasses on some of the performances. However, what you can say is Borthwick has now earned his reputation as being an experimental coach who will try things and try doing different things. He's picked a number of players in this tournament that have really stepped up. I will let you get onto Henry Pollock half hour shortly.
Only half hour?
Yeah, I know you want to wax lyrical on him, but I think the ones to highlight, the guys that came in. I mean, Ben Curry's obviously had a few goes in this tournament, and he's just been phenomenal, right? Yeah. He's really up and proven why Sale fans rate him as highly, if not higher, than Tom. I think Will Stewart, again, another superb performance, another lovely little bit of footwork for his try, and actually put footwork pretty much every time he had the ball. He's really dancing. He's got dancing feet now.
What a tournament he's had. Is
he now the best sidestepper in world rugby? I don't know. Cheslin Colby, eat your heart out.
I agree.
And the back three were all brilliant. Marcus Smith had a really good game at fullback, really good under the high ball. I mean, helped a bit by the Welsh kick in, which wasn't great. Elliot Daly, great in attack, or first phase attack, jamming it up into the midfield a few times and making ground. But Tom Roebuck, I thought, came in. He really took his chance, didn't he?
Yeah, Tom Roebuck had such a great game. He's physical, he's imposing, he stands up well in the tackle. He fights for those extra meters, which is what you want from your big physical wingers. Yeah. And he showed he can finish. So he's got both sides of the game. Yeah, fully deserved his try. I completely understand the decision to kind of bring him in. I thought putting Freeman at 13 and Roebuck on the wing, I was a bit not sure.
Yeah, I got some egg on my face after that call last week.
Yeah, you did. You did get some egg on your face after completely ruling out the possibility of Freeman at 13. But as we said, Borthwick experimented with it. People were calling for it to be tried. He tried it, and I'd say for the large part, it worked.
There is something really, really interesting to me about how. I mean, Freeman and Roebuck physically are quite similar.
Yeah,
I think they're quite similar players in a lot of ways. But they're obviously big, tall, rangy wingers. They both got great aerial ability. There's something quite exciting about having the two of them on the pitch and what that can do with a kicking strategy that really is working at the moment. Elliot Daly, again, proving his quality, but you've still got the likes of Feo Boso to come back in. Yes. You can't rule out Ollie Slight at home, the amount of tries that he scores. The options are really building for England in that back line. I think if they can square the circle of the centres at some point and make a decision on how they want that to play, and if it's Dingwall, is Dingwall, because I think he had a really good game again. If they make that decision and move forward with it, that backline has started to look like it's cooking to me.
Yeah, I agree. The centre equation's still one to be figured out. Obviously, Ollie Lawrence is out for some time with his Achilles. Does Henry Slade slot back in? Do you persevere with 3 minute 13 and see if that's the long-term solution? Because it looked like it worked. Is Dingwall the answer? These are all good questions. The Argentina tour will be interesting because I think most centres... I think Freeman's in with a chance for the Lions pick. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think the Argentina tour may be a good chance to experiment and try and see what centre partnerships are out there that we could start to kind of have as a backup to the old-fashioned Slade-Lawrence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've added a test against the USA to that tour as well today. So that'd be an interesting one for them. Well, look, I mean, we're dancing around it a little bit here, David. Do you want to give your review of Henry Pollock?
Well, I'm in a WhatsApp group with some friends who were watching the game, and we were before around the half-time mark, we were saying, I bet Pollock's only going to get 5 minutes to come on and not really get much chance. And we were saying, when he does come on, he's either going to score a try or get a yellow card. We were ecstatic when he came on at the 50-minute mark because that's 30 minutes of Pollock time. Yeah, he certainly made his mark. We were not expecting him to get 2 tries. we were very pleased with some of the housery work he was doing on the Welsh players on the floor, which has been flying around social media.
Was it Gareth Thomas's sock? I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little pull, and Gareth Thomas actually quite lucky to not get pinged for his reaction, if I'm honest.
Possibly.
He just looks absolutely ready-made for this stage.
Doesn't
It did not faze him one bit. The pass from George Ford for his try in the corner.
Let's just talk about that for a second. The rugby league end over end pull flat right across the defensive line straight to him.
Yeah.
And it's, Ford put him in for both tries, remember?
Yeah.
People have
quickly
forgotten what a good player George Ford is.
Cannot write him off. He's still a very, very good player. But I think the point I was going to make was there are wingers out there who wouldn't have caught that ball, because that was a fired pass. He took it. He just has such a high level of rugby skills, which I don't think people would appreciate yet. But I think the more we start watching him play, he's more than just a pet in a 7 shirt or an 8 shirt. He has like the handling skills. He has the IQ. So like I'm not sitting here saying he's a complete player now, but I think he will be a complete player once he's finished his maturation and got a few more tests under his belt. He's got to be in the England squad from now on. Like, you don't come on for a debut and score 2 tries and then get dropped back to the under-20s.
I don't see him dropping out. Yeah, he'll be there. He'll be there for the long term, I think. I mean, I loved it. I loved everything about his performance. I love that he came on. He's immediately having a laugh with the boys at the scrum. You could just see his attitude. I mean, you can already tell that he is going to be despised by every other set of fans in the world. And I think there's something to be said for that, because it's a mark of respect in and of itself.
Yeah, it's something that comes with some players. It's like, I always used to hate playing against New Zealand when they had Richie McCaw.
Yeah, let's be careful we're not making comparisons before they
No, I'm not saying. It's just that aura that some players carry.
Yeah.
Basically, most of the South African team at the moment, you just kind of feel like it's really annoying playing against them. I feel like England have got one of their own now, where other teams are going to be, other fans are going to hate him.
Well, I mean, you can factor in Ben Earl. I think, has got a bit of that about him.
Yeah.
Ellis probably, Maratoja.
Personality.
Players that other fans just despise. You're probably doing something right.
But this is what I want to see. I want players with personality. I want players that have got something about them, and he's got it about him. And it's really
got something to say. Yeah.
It's really interesting how some of the other players were talking about him after the game, and it's like they know how good he is, but they don't want to big him up too much because, like, he doesn't need it.
No, I don't think he's a man who needs his ego inflated. I think he's more than capable of managing that himself.
But it's interesting how, like, they're like, we can see, like, he's brought, like, a different level of energy to the camp and stuff. So for a 19, 20-year-old to be bringing that to the senior England men's squad, something to be excited about, I think.
Yeah, I think this is an exciting England squad now. I think for all the debate there is around selections, and everyone will always have their opinions on players who should be in and players should be out. I know there's more than most as a Gloucester fan.
Yeah.
You look at that England squad, I think, Borthwick's been very keen to stress it's got the lowest age profile apart from Italy, and the Italian team has more caps than them. It's got a real balance in terms of the players that are available, the different things they can do with the back row. You can play the 3 fetchers there, or you can bring in Jack Willis. You got Chandler Cunningham himself, also played a lot at second row. Hopefully, Ollie Chesham's not too badly injured. So it's a shame to see him got a goal so early. But there's options there, and there's different ways to play, and there's different ways to solve problems. I think given that we're 2 years away from the next World Cup, the age profile's really, really good. The older players, the likes of Jamie George, Luke Handicke, hopefully will still be knocking about by then. But you put that whole squad in context, and you can't help but, as an England fan, but be quite excited about what's brewing.
I'm very excited. I see some really great things coming towards England's rugby, because not only, as you say, the age profile of the current team, but the players on the fringes and coming through the system. Like, if we were to sit here and build an England squad of just under 25 players, it's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely. A final word on Wales, I think.
Go for it.
Just to just to put things in a little bit more context for Wales, pre-2005, Wales didn't win a Grand Slam for, I think, 27 years, something like that. Welsh rugby has a bit of a cyclical nature behind it. They've had a golden generation that's now gone. Faletau's the last real member of that. Neil Williams, I suppose, to an extent. Welsh rugby goes through these fits and troughs a little bit, and they're in a trough right now. They are troughing, and there's big things that need to happen there. However, there will be another great Welsh team to come out. They will be competitive again, probably sooner than any of us are really thinking about it now. So
yeah,
there's something to come in the future for Wales, but they're just going to have to get through this period without throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
I'm inclined to agree, and we'll touch on it later with the under-20s. There's definitely some roots of optimism for a Welsh fan there, but not to kick Wales while they're down. The final score was 40, a decent half century and a bit more for England. As we said, a record defeat for Wales, but a really, really positive ending note for England and something to really build on going into the summer, the Argentina tour and the autumn tests. And I think a lot of players in an England shirt put their hands up for the Lions, an awful lot of them. And we haven't even touched on how good players like Finn Smith was, a number of other players who I think really have stood out and given themselves like Lions chances. But let's move on to France versus Scotland, where there was everything to play for in this game because the score that England managed to put together. There was something to play for in this game, and France versus Scotland turned out to be a really good game. What were your thoughts, Rory?
So I think there's the air of inevitability, or there was the air of inevitability at points in this game. However, I thought Scotland for large periods of this game stress tested France really well. The way that Scotland attack find so attractive to watch. They're so innovative in how they try and find space and how they try and bring their best players into the game. So there's a lot to like about this Scotland team, I think, and there's a lot for them to build upon. But the power in that France team is just inevitable. I mean, even with without the need to sort of throw flying headbutts.
Yeah,
they don't really need to be doing things like that because they're just so powerful as a unit. And when they get going, I mean, it's just bit frightening to watch. It's a bit frightening to watch. Yeah. It was great to see Gael Fickou back out there.
Yes,
he's for a long time been one of my favourite players in world rugby. I rate him so highly. But this was French power. I think the rolling maul for them was just so
effective,
potent. Scotland. We know that's where Scotland's deficient, right? They don't have that upfront power in that way, and France just able to draw you into the way they want to play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. An interesting narrative I thought was, I wonder what the French fans were thinking before kickoff about having an English referee in this game.
Yeah, well, I suppose to some extent they'll be thinking, well, if it all goes wrong, we've got a nice easy target.
Part of it, and this is me being very cynical, I was thinking the referees were going out of their way to make sure that wasn't going to be a news story. Because I thought that Malvaca incident...
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a red card, and it was a straight red. Let's not beat around the bush here. There's the only people who debated it were the refereeing team.
I've never heard someone getting headbutt on the ground being described as low danger.
I've been headbutt on the ground, and I can tell you it felt dangerous.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, but let's not let that detract from what was a solid French performance. I did wonder if that Scotland try had stood and Van der Merwe had stayed on the pitch, Scotland would have been right back in that game at that point and were in the ascendancy. Could we have seen a different outcome? I don't know. I still kind of feel that the strength of that French 7-1 split bench, which again worked wonders, may have been decisive. But
I think there are French teams in the past that would have felt jittery in that moment, but this team looks so relaxed in themselves.
They do.
They are unflappable at the moment, and you couldn't say that about some France teams in the past. The stereotypes were there for a reason. But this one just seems very relaxed about what they're doing, and they just look confident that they're going to win. Even when it's not going right, they look confident they're going to win. I would say the same when you look back on the game against England. Obviously they didn't go on to win that game, but the way they played the game, even though everything kept going wrong, they just constantly looked confident about what they were doing.
Just some French arrogance in the nicest possible way.
Yeah, but it's great arrogance, isn't it? When it results in someone like BLBRI,
Yeah. It's like
just flying.
It's like when you turn up for like a local club game and you're up against like some random village club's second team and there's a player with bright white boots and they actually turn out to be really good. It's annoying, isn't it?
It's annoying, but I do like it when someone backs it up.
Oh yeah, and that's what the French are doing. They are backing up everything that they portray. They play with this style, this fluency that's really exciting to watch, and they keep delivering results. And when they are clicking, it feels inevitable that points are coming on that scoreboard. And I did think it was credit and maybe a bit of respect to Scotland that in this game, when France were given the opportunity to take 3 points, they took the 3 points. They weren't going to the corner.
This isn't a Scotland team you can underestimate because they can score from anywhere. You know, there's plenty of players there they'll know well, but you know that you only have to look across the pitch and see Finn Russell, Van der Merwe, and Blair Kinghorn just to think we can't take these lads lightly because they are flying. So look, I mean, I think this will be a disappointing tournament for Scotland.
Yeah,
overall, fourth is, for the talent in that team, fourth is not a good result. They've got to at some point break their hoodoo with Ireland. You can go away to Paris and lose. You can go away to London and lose. Those aren't to be ashamed of. And the fact that they probably should have beaten England, it's a different complexion. But they need to get over this mental block they got against Ireland and find a way to win those games. And they've got to find a way to maximise the talent they've got to hit. Because you look at France and you don't necessarily see an ending in sight for the quality they're bringing through. But with Scotland, you do worry whether they're going to be able to maintain the levels that they've shown in the last few years. And if they don't capitalise on it now, will they ever? I hope they do. Not maybe not at the expense of England, but I hope they will have a year where they really put it all together, because you don't want to see these nations fall away, and it would be a shame not to really build on something here, because as I say, there's a lot to like about that team.
Yeah, there is absolutely, and it does all lie in a question that I've seen banded around social media. What is the future like for Scotland, and is that future under Gregor Townsend?
I suppose what I'd say to those people who are questioning Gregor Townsend, and I get it, right? He hasn't won anything. They haven't gone through the group stages up, so there's something that hasn't quite clear. But I don't know that there's a better option for them there. I mean, maybe Franco Smith, but I'm not sure he's necessarily going to get more out of this team than they're already getting out of them now. I would keep Gregor there. I would be scouring for a forwards coach who can put this pack together in a way that
finds that grunt, even when they maybe don't have the edge in terms of sheer size. There's ways you can play the game. As Ireland prove, I think, you would say that maybe on sheer size alone, that Irish pack isn't necessarily going to win any awards, but they carry their weight.
They're often so effective. And that's probably what Scotland need to do, is find a way to replicate that. And the noises coming out in terms of what they're trying to do around organising their system to somewhat reflect what the Irish are doing. I think they've got plans for how they're going to build upon what they've got now, and I hope they come off, because they're too storied a nation to not be competitive at the top, and it's Murrayfield in the Six Nations is something special, and it's an atmosphere that deserves to be rewarded.
Completely agree. But this game ended 35-16 to France. So just a quick note, congratulations to France on winning the Six Nations. Probably thinking about it, probably the worthy victors at the end of the tournament, considering the rugby they played, the number of tries and points they scored. Only losing to England, so, kind of giving a nice little narrative there to going forward into future Six Nations. So kind of maybe that Anglo-French rivalry can return. But that brought Six Nations tournament to a fitting end. So let's have a think, Roy, about across the 5 rounds, if we were to draw up our team of the tournament, let's give it a try. Let's try and bring together what we think our team of the tournament would be.
Yeah, okay. Let's have a crack. Shall we just go in order then?
Let's go in order.
All right. I did have an attempt at putting this together, but I'm willing to debate some of these positions. I'm not going to die on every hill. Lou said I think Gross would have was in contention for me, but I've gone with Andrew Porter
Okay.
on this one. I think he's been brilliant.
Yeah.
And he's shown that consistently. He's put so many different facets into his game together. And when Ireland have been good, largely he's been at the centre of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. I'd also put an honourable mention in for Fischetti, who I thought for Italy has been really good and really kind of had a high work rate and done a huge amount of work. But I was juggling around Porter, Gross, and Fischetti, and I landed on Porter as well, mainly down to his performance against England in that first round, which I thought he was monumental. And kind of, as we said, that was kind of stamping his ticket to the Lions tour. That performance alone, I felt. So yeah, happy with Porter. Not going to ask you to die on a hill.
Yeah.
How about hooker?
Well, there's a few good options here. I mean, Dan Sheehan had a really good end to the tournament. Obviously, missed the start of it. Mal Vaca, up until the point he went full MMA, was having a really, really good tournament. Dave Cherry, I think, was brilliant for Scotland in probably quite unfancied circumstances, but he was so solid for them. Dave Cherry looks to me like an ex-policeman playing rugby.
Yeah.
Like, those classic old amateur days when there would be more than a few play for the police teams. But for me, the best hooker in the tournament has been Jamie George. Obviously missed the first game and that showed, I think, in terms of England not being able to kick on in the second half against Ireland. I've been so impressed by him. The bread and butter stuff, line out, scrummaging, set piece work has been great, but his all-round impact on the pitch, as well as his noticeable impact on that England squad when he came back in, I think he was fundamental to why they were so good.
Yeah.
So he's my pick.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to disagree with you. I wonder whether removing the burden of captaincy has freed him up to go back to what he's really good at.
Well, from what I can see, and he's obviously been quite heavily used in the kind of media appearances, even though he had the captaincy removed. I don't know that he's really changed his approach too much, but other than not having the ultimate, I think he's just got a really good way about him. And I think he's one of those players that players really respond to. You know, you can see the way that Marrow's been asked about him a few times, obviously. And the way that he talks about him, you can just see the impact he's had on him as a bloke.
Yeah.
And he's had plenty of difficulties in the last couple of years from a personal point of view. But he's never dropped his performances for England, and if anything, his performances are getting better.
Yeah. That's why I'm not going to disagree. I think his set piece work, and let's not talk about his work rate around the park and what he does ball in hand. His set piece work is exceptional, and it's obviously a craft he has absolutely worked at over the last decade of professional rugby, and he's got to a point now where he's so dependable in that area. You kind of forget how important that is to have in a player, and I think that's why sometimes he might get almost overlooked for some praise because it's become what we expect. But it's very easy to forget how much hard work's gone into becoming so dependable on that line-out throw in the scrums. Like, he has honed his craft, and respect for that.
Consummate pro.
Tighthead, I think we're probably going to agree on Tighthead here.
Will Stewart, isn't it?
Will Stewart, unquestionably.
The most improved man in English rugby, British rugby.
Yes. For me, this has been a real emergence of a player who's been spoken about really positively by props in the game for a long time. And I've never quite seen it on the pitch myself. But this is the first time consistently in an England shirt where I've just felt that scrum is in safe hands and this guy can do bits around the park too.
Absolutely. You know, he's now like triple threat prop. So I'm really pleased for him. Really pleased for the way he's developed and that he's getting his flowers. And at a good time when England have got some really exciting props coming through, good to have someone there who's been around the block a bit, has got the experience, has been through the highs and lows, that can help guide those players.
And he's setting a high bar for them to meet if they want to break into that team. It's not going to be a foregone conclusion anymore. That
jersey's no longer up for grabs. You know, it's going to take a real hard performance from someone to take the 3 shirt off him, which is great.
Completely agree. Okay, that's our front row locked out of Andrew Porter, Jamie George, and Will Stewart. Let's move on to the engine room in the second row. Who gets your first second row slot?
Marrow's just been good all tournament. He's really taken to being captain. His performance levels, I mean, he's been good in every game. there's always questions about his ability to give away a penalty. He lives on the edge, plays a bit on the edge. He's a nuisance. And actually, I still like that about him. And the fact that he's been able to maintain that while still keeping a really good rapport with referees and being really vocal and clear in that relationship with referees. I don't think there's been a better second row in the tournament at all. If you'd only give me one slot, I think he would have been my pick.
Yeah, I'm agreed with you there. I think Itoje's had one of his better extended period of time in a tournament in an England shirt for a while. Captaincy, he's taken to it like a duck to water. He's a real leader, and it has had the effect that I had really hoped it was, that like sometimes in the past he's had discipline issues and be a bit of a penalty magnet. That certainly wasn't the case this tournament. The next lock position, though, is going to be an interesting one, I think, because I've got a bit of an outside pick, but I'm interested to know what your pick is.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm probably still ruminating on this one, really. So this is, again, isn't probably a hill I'm going to die on. So, I mean, Tadhg Beirne's had a good tournament, again, for Ireland, but maybe not been as obviously effective as he has been in previous years. James Ryan's been pretty good, but again, probably without setting the world alight. Cannone was going quite well for Italy, but fell away probably a little bit. For me, it's probably between two Frenchmen.
Okay, interesting.
One's Miafu. I know he had one quite poor game, but Miafu's just so effective. And he's just, I mean, you can't miss him on the pitch at the best of times, but he's undeniable. What he does for France in terms of go forward, but his skills as well with the ball, just so central to France getting front football and ultimately what they do in attack. But actually, I think it's the bolter for me, from Guillard.
That's where I'd landed as well.
So impressed by him. Very different type of player to Miafu, but so impressed by him. He has, come out of nowhere a little bit from my point of view. I hadn't seen any of him really beforehand, but I mean, he looks a really exciting prospect for them there. So yeah, BR for me.
Yeah, that was my outside pick that I was going to suggest. The fact that he's now given Galtier the headache of I need to bench Miafu because he's playing too well to drop.
Like Galtier needed another selection headache.
Yeah, so yeah, for me, second row locked in, Itoje and Guillard, and what a second row pairing that would be if that ever was to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, back row, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, tough. It was tough to fit sort of 8 names into 3 here.
Yeah.
So I am going to give you my 3.
Okay.
And then I'm going to then maybe some honourable mentions. But I'm going to give you my 3. Tom Curry, I think, has been the standout player.
Yeah.
In general, he's just been brilliant.
Yeah.
I think he gets in whatever happens. So I'm putting him at 6. But
okay. He can operate across the back. Yeah.
He's pretty happy anywhere. At 7, I'm putting in Jack Morgan.
Yeah.
Who, obviously had a tough day against England, but I mean, bless him, he can't do it all on his own. And for a lot of this tournament, he's just been phenomenal in very difficult circumstances. In every single game. So impressed by him. He's on that Lions playing for me. Number 8, I'm going with Doris.
Okay.
Aldry nearly pipped it, but I think Doris has been really good again. He's so quietly effective in everything he does, whilst interspersing that with moments of being really loudly effective as well.
Yeah.
Plus he's really handsome. We've spoken about that a lot already, and I'm going to reiterate it. And his leadership, I think, has been really exceptional for Ireland.
Yeah.
So those are my 3. I mean, I'll give you some my honourable mentions, but are there any disagreements?
Once again, somehow we've managed to come to the same conclusion. I think if Aldrit if France hadn't adopted the 7-1 split and Aldrit was getting subbed at the 45-minute mark in like the last 3 games, he probably would have worked his way into this for me.
Yeah.
But it kind of felt like France relied on him a little less, so it kind of meant his impact was a bit lesser than it has been in the past. So I lumped on the exact same back row of Tom Curry, Jack Morgan and Caelan Doris, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is a Lions back row we see this summer.
It's an exciting one if it is.
Throw in Jack Willis, but Lions is for another day.
So I have got some honourable mentions for the back row though.
Lovely.
There are
Henry Pollock, one of them.
No, not quite.
It's
good a half an hour as it was.
Okay.
Not quite enough to get into my honourable mentions. On the blind side, Jelanche been fantastic for France. Has Kroos, both great options that they've got there, frightening options. And Jamie Ritchie for Scotland as well. I think has been really good when he's been put there. On the loose, Boudon, again, another player I didn't know a huge amount about before the tournament. If I'm honest, I hadn't seen much of him in club rugby. But I mean, he's another one who's the fact that they haven't missed Charles Olivon because they found this guy. It just says a huge amount. Yeah, Ben Curry and Ben Earl as well. I think deserve to be mentioned for the performances they've been putting in. Ben Earl, I think, back to his best again and looking really, really sharp. And Ben Curry again, finally getting the recognition he deserves for what a good player he is. You know, I think some of the players that you supposed to, you know, someone like Van der Fleer, I think, has probably not been his best tournament. Peter O'Mahony obviously got the send off. If we're being harsh, probably the tournament that shows that maybe this was time to call it a day in terms of what he was doing. You know, still a warrior, still involved in everything, but not maybe as impactful as he has been in the past. Jagu at back row and centre been really good, but not quite enough for me to get into my team. But Tom Willis as well, I think should just be praised for having a really good impact as an old-fashioned number 8 for England as well. Another option for them to build upon.
Yeah, all those names you mentioned have had very strong tournaments to varying degrees. But I'm happy to lock in Tom Curry, Jack Morgan, Caelan Doris to complete our pack. Now, foregone conclusion in the 9 shirt.
It's Dupont.
It's
always
Dupont.
Dupont.
It's got to be Dupont.
It has to be Dupont. I mean, just run out of things to say about him at this point. I will give honourable mentions to Gibson Park and actually Luca as well, who's been brilliant when called upon. But it's Dupont. It just always is.
Simple, straightforward.
It'll be Dupont even if he's got one leg.
Yeah, which he might do.
Which he does.
Yeah, which he does at the moment. Yeah, so that's quick and easy. The 10 shirt.
It's got to be Finn Smith for me.
Yeah.
I think Prendergast had moments where he looked really good, but moments where he showed that there's some work to do there.
Yeah.
Finn Russell had some moments, but a bit hot and cold. Garbisi, pretty hot and cold. Entermack, if he hadn't got himself sent off in the first game, maybe would have been in with a shout on it. But, you know, that's a big blot against his copybook on this one. Finn Smith just impressed me. I knew he was a good player. You know, I've watched plenty of him for Saints, but the way he's stepped into the international arena and looked at home there and tied together a backline that was not entirely firing to the point that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. I've just been so impressed.
Yeah, once again, unexpectedly, we are agreeing on everything, Rory. Obviously, I was going to land on Finn Smith for many reasons, but ultimately he has been phenomenal, I think, considering his age, his experience in an England shirt, and the backdrop that he was brought into the squad. 100% pure credit to him. His stock has risen tenfold, I imagine. So yeah, that's 9 and 10 locked in. Dupont and Finn Smith, or what I'd pay to have that at Northampton Saints.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the centres, 12 and 30.
So I'd locked in Bundyaki as 12 until I watched the Italy-Ireland game. And then it had to be Menoncello again for me.
Yeah.
He was in my honourable mentions immediately, but I thought Bundyaki, it's that picture of him against, was it the France game where he's bloodied and he's confident, it's just that warrior. You know, I love that warrior aspect to him. And he's a player I've always really liked, but he just looks tough as nails.
Yeah. But
Menoncello's performance in that game and in some of Italy's poorer performances for a while, he's still looked class.
Yeah.
And he constantly looks class. Yeah. And as a spoiler alert, it's Brex for me at outside centre as well.
Well, Menoncello was a non-negotiable for me. He had to be in that 12 shirt. 13 shirt.
I did ruminate on Hugh Jones.
Hugh Jones, for me, I think would be my pick in the 13 shirt, personally.
I won't die on the hill of Brex, although I think he's had a brilliant tournament again.
I think Brex has had a brilliant tournament.
But yeah, Hugh Jones has been good.
I'm consistently impressed with what Hugh Jones can do in that Scottish backline. As you said earlier, how exciting they are to watch. I think he plays a huge part in that, and quite often doesn't get the credit he deserves as well. So that's where I landed, but I'm not going. I also wouldn't die on the hill around Brex either, because I also think the having a team of the tournament there that has Menoncello and Brex in it, that's a pretty feisty centre partnership that I'm not going to break up too much. But for the purposes of this podcast, I'm locking in Menoncello and Hugh Jones as the centre partnership.
Fair enough.
Now back three, I'm pretty sure I know. Yeah, left wing's pretty sewn up. It would be a pretty bold call for any of us to claim it wasn't a particular Frenchman.
Yeah, Louis Biabra. I made a note when I was watching the France Scotland game. He is Olympics quick, isn't he? And on top of that, brave with the ball, and he's brave in defence, and he's so exciting. One of my moments of the tournament was his crossfield kick in his own 22 to Damien Penaud.
Yeah.
I just love watching him play.
Completely unnecessary, and I loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. More unnecessary things, please, just for fun.
Yeah.
We're pro funsies.
We are pro funsies here. Let that be known. On the other wing, I think it's very easy to go for the other winger / centre player who also got a try in every single round of the tournament.
Yeah, I've gone with Tommy Freeman.
Yeah.
I think Darcy Graham had some really strong moments.
Yeah.
I think Ange Capozzo's been really good for Italy when he's got the ball. Suffered from being put on the wing rather than consistently at fullback. I think we saw against England why he's such a good fullback. Penaud's not had his best tournament.
No.
Mac Hansen had a really good game against Italy, but obviously hasn't played much of this tournament.
I feel James Lowe started strongly, but then kind of faded.
Yeah, obviously he missed last week, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, for me, Tommy Freeman's just really stepped up in this. I had plenty of conversations with people last year who were questioning Tommy Freeman in this side. I suspect he suffered in comparison to what Feo Bosa was doing. Really, is a player that is very exciting to watch and does lots of exciting things. I thought people were sleeping on how good Tommy Freeman was a little bit, and he's really shown up in what he can do in this tournament. You know, he's not just a try-scoring threat. He's such a weapon in all-round attack. He's so big. You know, I'm going to go back to it. He's so good in the air. His all-round skill set is really good, which is why he's stepping up to centre, I think, so easy for him. Massively impressed with him.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. That was my pick as well. Now, fullback, where did you land here?
Well, it was between two for me. So
I'm between two as well. Do you want to say both their names at the same time? 3, 2, 1. Kinghorn and Ramos.
Ramos.
Yes.
Yeah. It was between those two. I've landed on Kinghorn.
Okay.
Bit of a coin flip, really, for me. You can justify either of those in this tournament, and maybe this team should have more Frenchmen in it than it does, given they won it. But Kinghorn has taken the form that he's shown for Toulouse and where he's really improved for Toulouse and brought it to a Scotland team. You know, it wasn't that long ago that people were questioning whether Kinghorn was good enough for international rugby.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. People weren't really sure where he should play. Is he a winger? Is he a fly half? Is he a fullback? He's now a nailed-on Lions fullback for me. If he stays fit, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. Thomas Ramos has been great for France. You know, his goal kicking is having that dependability is just so important for them. He's got, you know, he stepped up to fly half as well and performed really well there. He's such a sort of parochial player. He just does things that are fun to watch, the little offloads here and there. But Kinghorn just takes it for me for what he does in attack and some of those tries that he scores. He's a player I really like.
Not going to disagree with you too much. Thomas Ramos, I think what he offers off the tee, you get from Finn Smith in this team anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with Blair Kinghorn as well. So that's locked in. Back three. Louis, BLBRA, Tommy Freeman, Blair Kinghorn. I'm happy with that team.
Yeah.
I'm very happy.
I mean, it's a strong team. It's been a really good tournament. I think there's been some really good narratives. You know, obviously, even with the teams that are struggling, you had the interest of would Italy finally get that win when they were the favourites over Wales. Obviously, with Wales losing Gatland halfway through and showing a bit of improvement, and you know, and doing something a little bit different. The improvement of England throughout the tournament, France just doing French things, you know, it's just been a good tournament. You know, again, proving why the Six Nations is the jewel in the crown.
Yeah, couldn't disagree.
Did you have any standout moments?
Well, for me, a moment that really stands out, and it's probably not what you're expecting to hear. That moment where Alex Mitchell got booed doing the 8th box kick of the half against Scotland. For me, I kind of feel that was a pivotal moment that I think there was some reflection there, perhaps from Borthwick up in the coach's box, from the players on the pitch, that what we're doing here isn't working. We've not got the fans behind us. We're not playing fun rugby. The fans are picking up on this. And it almost felt like that from that moment onwards, that there was a decision amongst the team to change things up. And it's not just the team, it's the coaches as well. Like that experimental, this Borthwick kind of trying new things, it all seems to stem from that moment. So for me, I feel that was a real pivotal moment. It's bizarre to say, the England team getting booed doing a box kick. As an England fan perspective, I think that was such a huge moment as a turning point for that team.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, you could see a real shift in what they were doing from then, and long may it continue, because what's happened since then has been much more entertaining to watch. I struggled to nail this down as to what was my moment of the tournament. So some honourable mentions that I mentioned the Louis Biaberet crossfield kick in the zone 22, great moment. Malvaca's underarm line out.
Oh yeah, that was great.
That was great. The French fans singing La Marseillaise in the Aviva when they were hammering Ireland.
Yeah.
I just love the atmosphere they bring when the French fans travel. I think they're really, really exciting. Elliot Daly scoring the winner against France, and the atmosphere in Twickenham, brilliant. The Welsh anthem before the England game, obviously it didn't quite pan out, but the feeling of in that, you really felt it. But my moment of the tournament is, and we spoke about it, and it's an emotional moment. It's a very sentimental moment. But it was Chris Hoy bringing the ball out pre-Ireland, and
very poignant.
Yeah, very poignant. It's going to get me emotional thinking about it again now, because he's such an icon of sport in general. But that for me was that really stuck in the mind, and him walking back off the pitch, or having handed the ball to the referee and giving it the fist pump to the Scotland players. Unfortunately not quite enough to G them up to actually get over the line on that one. But for me, that moment of seeing him, it's like, when Doddy, bless him, when he was still around, and he did. It's moments like that I really feel the power of this tournament for me.
Yeah, I feel that it transcends the sport when those moments happen, which is what makes it stand out as such a strong moment. So yeah, that's a great pick. But with that rounds off the Ruxballs Oval coverage of the Six Nations. It's been a great tournament. We've enjoyed talking about it, but now we're going to start getting into the nitty-gritty of some other rugby.
Back to the old meat and drink now.
And it comes thick and fast. This weekend, Premiership Rugby returns, and it's the Derby Day weekend. So we're not going to go into each fixture, because we're limited in how much we can talk by, time and things like that. But I do want to raise the question of, how does it feel as a rugby fan of the Gallagher Premiership that this Derby Day weekend, which is quite a bumper weekend normally for fans and kind of TV viewings, is it marketing genius putting this directly after Six Nations, or is it a shot in the foot because we're going to have some players being rested because they've been away internationally for so long?
No, I think it's a great move. I think you take the momentum and you're obviously gambling on there being a lot of goodwill in English rugby post Six Nations, and fortunately for them, I think there is. Might
work out, yeah.
You're gambling on people watching the Six Nations and thinking, God, I really fancy going and watching a rugby game, actually. It looks like good fun. Who's playing this weekend? And you double down on that by making it a derby weekend. And yeah, I think it's a really, really good move. And it's one of those times when English rugby has proactively made a good move, I think. You double down, you make hay when the sun shines, and you try and capitalise on what goodwill you can. To me, this seems like it's an absolute slam dunk from Premiership Rugby, and I'm absolutely behind it.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if it wasn't sellouts across the board. With kind of fans wanting to come and carry on watching. It's been a really interesting tournament. So I've had some friends who've kind of lost interest in rugby over the years, but this year they've said that they've started taking interest in it again, and they've been watching it, and they've been inquisitive about Premiership Rugby and asking about, what team does this player play for? So I'm really hoping that will translate into what will be, hopefully, some more full stands at these games, not just this coming weekend, but coming forward. And I think you're right. I think this is potentially a little bit of genius, putting this weekend, because it's that bit of narrative of local rivalry that will entice casual fans to stick with it, I'm hoping. Some of the fixtures, so the Friday night, Newcastle versus Sale. So the Battle of the North, that'll be interesting how that lands with Sale, so many returning from international duty. Newcastle showing that they're still around.
Yeah.
Northampton versus Leicester. That's going to be one hell of a fixture on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Then on the Saturday, we're looking at...
You got Saracens Quins.
Always a tasty fixture.
Always tasty fixture. Are they putting that one on at Tottenham again this year?
Yeah, so that's at Tottenham again. So that's their showdown fixture.
I went to that last year. That was a really good occasion. If you're in London, well worth going to that because the Tottenham Stadium's well worth a visit.
And again, genius from Saracens to put that game there. And then Bristol versus Exeter. So that'll be interesting how those two teams fare coming back from international duties. And then the Sunday game, your lads travelling down to the Wreck. That's a tough assignment.
My beloved Cherry and Whites. Yeah, we have got the worst return from the Six Nations. We've got Bath away, Bristol at home when Bristol are better away than they are at home, and then Saracens away. So our top four hopes, I think, really hinge on our next three fixtures. I can't say I'm overly confident in going to the Wreck, but there's nothing more exciting for a Gloucester fan than the Bath game. You know, a chance to stick it up and. You just hope that we get the opportunity. I've seen lots of stuff coming out of Gloucester over the last few weeks because we've not a huge number of international players involved with England at all. And we weren't in the latter stage of the Premiership Rugby Cup. So from what I can see, they've been putting a lot of work in on the paddock. They've had Ospreys down doing live training with them. They had, I think, Queensland Reds were over there one point as well. I think one of the other Welsh teams might have gone over as well at one point. With us being the fifth region, of course, we get partnerships with the other with the other regions. So I'm not going to say I'm optimistic for Gloucester's chances on Sunday. It's tough going to the Wreck at the best of times, but it'll be some occasion there, and hopefully we come out firing.
I think it'll be close because Bath. Yes, they're probably on a high because they've won the Premiership Rugby Cup. So a lot of their fringe players are going to be on a high. They've been getting some game time. They've been playing rugby competitively. But it is always tricky getting these returning players to get back into the swing of things of playing the Bath way. I've seen it in the past with Northampton. The first fixture back after the Six Nations was always a tricky one for Northampton because we always seem to have quite a few away. I'm slightly worried about the game against Leicester this weekend. So I think Gloucester have a chance. If you're gonna steal a victory at the Wreck, I think this weekend is as good a chance you're going to get in a long time.
Hopefully we catch them cold and get the win. But either way, I think it's a weekend of rugby I'm really looking forward to. In addition to that, you've got the Women's Six Nations as well.
Oh yes,
which I'm really looking forward to watching. I'm going to be paying full attention to that, and we'll be doing the Women's Six Nations Fantasy.
We are sign up to the Women's Six Nations Fantasy League because we are doing it. I'll be posting it out on the socials through the week just to try and get people on board. I always think it's a bit of fun, this one, and if anyone doesn't have Ellie Kildan as your captain, you are missing a trick there. Yes,
you're mad. But yeah, it'd be a great weekend of rugby, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. Off the back of what was another really good weekend of rugby to watch.
I know we are absolutely getting spoilt with rugby at the moment.
I would like to talk about the Premiership Women's Rugby final because I've been really looking forward to talking about this.
Let's go.
So Gloucester Hartbury against Saracens at the StoneX in North London. So the final of the Premiership Women's Rugby, where Gloucester Hartbury came out on top, Saracens came second. These were the two best teams in the tournament, fighting it out to get the trophy. A really, really good match, really entertaining to watch. Gloucester Hartbury coming out on top 34-19 in the end, but not having it all their own way at all. They were down 19-5 at one point, I think, and down to 14 players before overpowering the Saracens team with a superb performance from the pack. So some mentions, I think, from the Gloucester team. Mia Venner on the wing, really, really strong performance. I hope she gets some more caps for England in this tournament. I know there's a lot of competition in the back three, but she was brilliant. Both sides of the ball, but just lethal in attack. Mo Hunt, again, just proving what a fantastic player she is. Just marshalled the Gloucester Hartbury girls.
She's by far and away the best English scrum half that I've seen playing in the PWR. She's so good.
It was a really good all-round performance from her. Emma Singh at fullback, not her best day with the boot, but with the ball, brilliant.
Yeah.
In the pack, so there's a few players to mention. So Zoe Allcroft, very good. Sarah Beckett, very good. Alex Matthews, very good. Neve Jones at hooker, I thought was excellent. She put me in mind of, do you remember Phil Greening?
Of course.
Yeah, very similar type player. Quite a small hooker. Apparently they call her the nuisance.
That seems very fitting.
Which seems apt. But the star player for me was Maud Muir in the tight end.
I've loved seeing the clips going around social media of Maud Muir. Yeah. Just your power, passion, strength. Yeah. It's so impressive. You can see why she's like
Yeah, it's really very iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah, some strong performances on the Saracens side. So I'd say that they really gave Gloucester a tough game, right? So they raced out into a bit of a lead. Jess Breach, who's obviously come back from quite a long-term injury, putting her hand up to say that Ellie Kildunn's not the only act in town at fullback for England, and she'll be right in the mix for selection there.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Kildun and Breach both playing together for England in the Six Nations, which is very exciting from an England point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very impressed by Ella Virvas in 9. I thought she was very good. Zoe Harrison had a pretty good game as well. I sort of steered the team around for large periods of the game. Marley Packer's a warrior.
Yeah.
She's just keeps going. Maybe not the player she was some years ago, but just an absolute warrior and just involved in everything for Saracens.
She's the sort of player you want on your side and not to be playing against.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be against her. And Georgia Evans again as well. We mentioned her in the semi-finals, just another really strong day.
Yeah.
But for me, I hold my hands up and say I probably haven't engaged with the PWR in previous years nearly enough. And
that changes now.
That absolutely does, because having watched quite a bit of this season, it's great. It's a really great watch. I really recommend anyone to go. There's a really good atmosphere in the games, really good way about it, and the teams are really competitive as well now. It's not a
good standard. It's a really
it's a really premier women's club game.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen that there is an American league being spun up?
Oh, really? That's exciting.
So I'm assuming that'll be interesting to see. But something I also want to ask: what were your thoughts on the mascot race? Good or a bit of a gimmick?
This is probably one of those bits where I'm less fun than I would otherwise be on things. I don't mind this kind of stuff, right? Like,
it is a younger crowd at the PWR.
It's not for me. It's just not. They're not doing it for me, and it's not. It's not for me in terms of, is it my thing? It's one of those things. So it feels like one of those ideas that's been imported from American sports, and they're trying out to see if British fans will like it. I don't see it catching on. We are too grumpy as a nation. But yeah, it's too wholesome.
Too family friendly fun, which for British sport doesn't fit. But I like, again, it's another example of the PWR not being afraid to try new things.
Well, no reason not to try it, and if I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to be wrong about it. If it's
the fact that you're not engaged by it doesn't mean that there isn't a whole group of people.
It's not for me. So that's fine.
The rugby's good enough. The rugby's good enough to make up for that. You're turning up for the rugby. You're not turning up for the mascot race.
Exactly. I think as long as the game on the pitch is good enough, I don't really care what they do outside of it. But I'm glad they're trying things.
Yeah. No. I think so. And I think it was a really fitting fixture, game, spectacle to be a good ending point for what has been a really, really good competition. As we said, PWR. We are taking notice of what's going on there. We think it's a really good competition. We'll be tracking it a lot closer going forwards, and we're just looking forward to seeing what happens next season. And we're fully behind the Red Roses in the Women's Six Nations, which we will be covering in the weeks ahead. Women's rugby, we're here for it. We're fans. So let's pivot slightly. Let's talk about the under-20s Six Nations, because there is a storyline here that's probably worth digging out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dig out young players in an age grade team. I don't want to stick a boot in, because the England boys will be very disappointed having gone to Cardiff with the chance of a Grand Slam and losing. But players as good as that, ostensibly as good as that, putting up that type of performance in that occasion is pretty disappointing. It's not the losing that can happen, and all credit to the Welsh boys. They really, really were up for it, and they tackled their absolute hearts out, and against an England team that was big and powerful and has proved that in all the previous games, which is why they were on for a Grand Slam. But the skill level that the England players showed in that game was nothing short of dreadful. And I mean, I think they knocked it on over the try line 3 times, going for the hero moment when they didn't have to do it. And these are players who are good enough not to do that. So Mark Mapletoft came out of it really well. He'd spoken up this been a possibility during the week as well. But I think that this is a moment to reflect for a lot of those England players on how they want to go to the next step, because this was a disappointing, and credit to France because they didn't fluff their lines. And 45-40 is a good game. You got your money's worth if you went to that one, and all credit to Scotland. So, and being every bit a part of that game as they could be. From England's perspective, though, this was disappointing because they suffered from a pretty dreadful refereeing performance. I would also say that. I don't like to dig out referees at all. I would have been disappointed at the level that I play at by this one.
Yeah, and it felt like it was a disappointing performance for both teams, really. It certainly wasn't just pointing in one direction.
He was bad for both sides.
It just ruined the game. And I think the frustration is that, as you said, the skill level was really low, and it's because we've seen that isn't typical of this team.
No, they've got the skills.
Yeah.
But they completely fluffed their lines on this one. So
maybe this will light the fire under them to go into the Junior World Cup in Italy, that we've now clarified as the host nation.
Yeah, sometimes you need a knock to put things in perspective. There might have been a case where, the previous games had been, to a greater or less extent, relatively easy for England. Even the France game, which, by all accounts should have been probably their toughest, they got through that pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
And maybe they were overconfident and, drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. Because they've had a lot of good write-ups as well for what this, where people think this team can develop. You yourself have been very effusive on the players coming through this pathway.
Yeah.
So this is probably one of those moments where, maybe they needed that dose of reality. Outside of that, congratulations to Italy getting the win against Ireland. Big win for Italy. Well deserved. Ireland, I think, have had a pretty disappointing tournament. So they'll probably need to reflect a little bit on what they're doing from an age grade level, because they've fallen away a little bit.
Yeah, that'll be a huge disappointment for them, I think.
Yeah. Scotland, I think, have had a really positive tournament.
Yeah, for them. I generally feel like maybe the results haven't quite gone as Scotland would have liked, but I feel the performances have been actually a lot better than I was expecting. And I think this year they're going to go into the Junior World Cup, where they didn't qualify for it last year. They're going to be part of it this year. I think they're going to really try and tackle it. See what they can do to show themselves on the world stage. So yeah, I agree. France, they took the opportunity they've been given. Come away the winners of both the under-20s and the men's. I said at the start of the tournament that if England don't win the Grand Slam, that's a disappointing tournament for them, and I think that probably is fair, because on paper that team should have won that tournament with ease, and they could have, but as you say, fluffed their lines significantly in the game against Wales. But that's the beauty of under-20s rugby. We roll on next year, new crop of players, we go again, we see what happens. We'll see how effusive I am next year about the next crop of under-20s that come along. But I'm still excited about this group. I still think England go on to win the World Under-20s Championship, which we will be covering. But I think for now, we go on to something slightly more regal. It's time to talk to El Presidente of the Democratic People's Republic of the Front Row.
Well, I am delighted this week because there are 2 inductees to the DPRFR.
Oh, fantastic. Double initiation.
A double initiation, and it's 2 players who put on a great performance to win their club the three-peat, to send Sean Lynn off into the sunset of Welsh international rugby. Muir and Neve Jones, for me, were standouts in that final. And Neve Jones, I'm going to touch on it first of all. I'm going to be, I think, nominating her for some sort of espionage role. Wily, small, nuggety.
Yeah.
I think espionage, covert ops, something along those sort of lines. I can see her going behind enemy lines in the Republic of Locks and assassinating a few enemy giraffes. But the Minister for the Defence is Muir.
Fantastic.
For me.
I feel that's very apt.
Whether she's feathering her opponents in the open field, which she did on more than a few occasions, or simply shielding rolling mauls as they tumble inevitably towards the line, she is the impenetrable wall. And I've no doubt that she will protect the DPRFR for many years to come. She goes straight to the front lines as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, you don't need, was it 2.5% of GDPR of the DPRFR to protect the nation when you got Maud Muir doing it by herself?
Absolutely. I'm going to take all the budget I was going to spend on tanks and guns and spend that all on a
Cake.
a lavish spa sauna for the palace.
Oh, perfect. And I'm sure, I don't think you've yet appointed a Minister for Finances, but I'm sure they'll approve that anyway. No.
Absolutely. So, yes, really pleased to be able to appoint the first women into the DPRFR, Neve, Jones and Muir.
Very fitting appointees, I'd say.
Leading their team to the three-peat and a welcome addition to our cabinet.
I couldn't agree more. The cabinet is taking shape nicely. I'm thinking at some point I might do a nice little portrait just to kind of paint the picture of who's now in the cabinet for you, Rory, just to remind you of who you've actually selected over these weeks. So you just get a good feel of kind of the makeup of this cabinet. And I'll maybe next week I'll give a nice little rundown of where the cabinet's up to, just so we can kind of get a good feel of who is kind of governing the DPRFR for all our DPRFR interests in the future. But you know, I've got that admin covered, El Presidente, don't you worry, as the administrator for the nation. That brings us smoothly onto Q&A. And we have got a couple of questions that have come in this week that I think are quite interesting questions. So we've had a question come in from our mysterious creative director.
Old CD.
The old CD. Let me paint the picture that he's painted for us, Rory, and it would be good to get some thoughts on this. So he started this off by pointing out that 15, 20 years ago, bench players were simply injury replacements. However, it's no secret that bench players are now really important to any team, and a team lacking in bench strength is a massive blocker to winning and succeeding. And there are some players who may even be categorised as professional benchers, finishers, as you deem fit to call them. But the question is, can you see younger players coming through the system now being coached into being specifically specialist bench players, never destined to be a starter, but to come on for 20, 25 minutes to cause as much mayhem as possible? Can you see that as a feasible route for players in this current system?
So that's a bit like a special team in the NFL or sort of thing.
Yeah.
Coming up for a specific purpose. I don't think I can see players being developed specifically for that role. What I can see is players being signed and selected for that role if that's what they feel they're capable of. So I'm thinking larger players. You know, if you look at someone like Miafu, France have to use him in a very specific way to get enough out of him for enough time. You know, you can't, for a player that size, you just can't expect to do the kind of things you'd expect from, say, Maro Itoje, who's obviously a very different type of physique. So I think you're already starting to see certain players being selected with kind of that in mind. And you could probably make the argument that a lot of front rows are now being coached and trained to only play a set amount of game. I won't name any names, but there are certain players, even in the Premiership, which is a relatively quick league, who you would probably generously say, are specialised to play shorter bursts.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice way of saying it.
I don't think it will be a development goal for young players, but I can certainly see certain players making it at the top level in a role like that.
Yeah. It feels like the impact off the bench is becoming more and more important, and whether we will see a world where players are signed for those specific reasons, I think we are almost there, where players are signed for their kind of ability to play in multiple positions, ability to have impact off the bench. Whether it will be a specific thing that players aim for, I think the way rugby still is, there's still every chance you may be called upon 5 minutes into a game because injuries happen at any moment. I don't think any aspiring player can just fixate on being a 25-minute player.
No.
Because if you do that, especially if you're in the front row and you have to come on after 5 minutes, you're going to do your team a disadvantage after 25 minutes because you're going to be gassed and you're going to get turned over at every scrum.
Yeah, you can see someone like Winnie Antonio. So earlier on in his career, you would probably say that if you're being generous, he was a 20, 30-minute player who has worked on it and gone on to become almost an 80-minute player in some games. Will Skelton's probably a similar example of that, as someone who went from being a 20-minuter to be in a 60, 70, 80 minute.
Yeah.
So I don't see players developing specifically in that role, but I can see players being selected. So maybe certainly in the club game where you've maybe got a bit more leeway on these kind of things. You know, if I was being cruel, I'd name a couple of names now, but I'm not cruel.
No,
I'm not feeling.
Let's not be cruel. But I know exactly who you're referring to.
Question for you, David.
Yes.
So this came through from Funston.
Yeah.
Based purely on this year's Six Nations alone, if your club could sign any player who featured in the tournament, who would it be and why?
So there's some real, like, straight line, obvious choices you can make here. Dupont, because he's the best player in the world.
Yeah, let's assume that Dupont improves any team that he's in, so maybe he's ruled out of this equation.
But for me, and it's probably fairly obvious after what I said earlier, I just think Menoncello, the fact he's still incredibly young, he's got all of the physical characteristics that you desire to have as a centre. He's got, I still think, room to grow with the age he's at. Even though at my club, which I support Northampton Saints, which if those of you aren't aware, I'd like to think you are, even though I'm very, very happy with the centre options we have already, if I could take Menoncello tomorrow, I would take him without hesitation. He's a player I am incredibly excited about, just generally as a rugby fan. So I think that's who I'd pick if I could pick any player out of the Six Nations.
He looked very good in that Saints team.
He would look very, very good. And like having that physical, because he's got that pace, defence, handling ability, that kind of full package, having that and the Saints back line to go alongside like the silky smoothness and the outside Finn Smith, immense. How about you? Would you pick anyone for Gloucester?
I think I would it would be between Aldrete and Doris, obviously, so I can ogle them every week. I think I'll go with Kevin Doris, though. I think in the way that Gloucester are playing at the moment, he would really thrive with us, or we'd certainly thrive having him there. Having someone that rangy who's also got that kind of physical impact as well. I think someone like that, you know, when Zach Mercer was fit, he had a very similar kind of impact for us. Obviously, it doesn't look like he's going to be around for much longer. So we are in the market for a number 8, Kaylan. If you want, I will go on a date with you if it'll get you over the line. There's an offer. I would really like to see Kevin Doris in the cherry and white. I think he'd look. I think he'd really improve what we're doing in the pack.
I think it'll be really interesting to see how he fares in the Premiership. But going from kind of being mollycoddled in the Leinster kind of luxury rooms and having to turn out week in, week out in a quite attritional league, the Premiership, I'd be really interested to see how he goes. I think he will excel, but it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. Yeah. I'm happy with that. So one final question, and this one's from me, Rory. This isn't from a listener, this is from me. You may have seen the news this week around the purported loan to Newcastle Falcons being backed by other Premiership Rugby clubs and CVC Capital, who own 27% of Premiership Rugby. But the story is that there is a £4 million loan being given to Newcastle Falcons to help continue their operation. What are your thoughts on this and what that means for the sport, or what it might mean for the sport?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I don't want to see Falcons fold. We've spoken about how much we like Falcons and how much we want them to continue as that kind of bastion in the northeast. And I'm more sceptical about the ability of even Ealing stepping up from the Championship to fill that berth. I don't think the Premiership works with less than 10 teams.
No.
But for nothing else, clubs need the revenue of another game, right?
Yeah, we can't afford to lose another side.
No. So all that put together, I think they've done the right thing to plug the gap now. But it's a short-term fix, right? It's a loan, first and foremost. So at some point, much like the COVID loans, it's going to have to pay back. And these are not clubs that can really go without the money they've given away to Newcastle. So, they're going to have to find a solution fast to Newcastle, find an investor and find a long-term plan. I worry about what it says about the general health of the game still, which we know is fragile. I know it has been fragile for a while. If we're still having to do this, I mean, it worries me for a myriad of reasons. But primarily, it just worries me that are they taking the steps you need to to fix this yet because there's still a lot of things up in the air about what English rugby and Premiership rugby are doing and are going to do. There's not been, there's still a big fight going on with the RFU, which is dragging on. Issues around Prem 1, Prem 2, that's looking a little bit less likely it's going to happen. Rookie League looking less likely it's going to happen. They can't fund all the clubs in the league. I don't see how they're going to be able to do any of that stuff either. Yeah, I worry that it's another sticking plaster, and at some point the whole game is made of sticking plasters.
You just hope there's not a point where the game itself bursts beyond repair.
Well, put it this way, if they go down to 9 teams, I don't see how they come back from it.
No, there'd have to be a serious, radical rethink if that was to happen. I think the positives I'm trying to draw from it is, from what I've seen, that it's alluding to the fact that there's a bumper premium TV deal coming soon over the horizon from TNT, based off of some healthy viewing figures and crowd numbers. So perhaps they're kind of banking on that being as a way of repaying the debt. The fact that other clubs are in a position to lend money paints a picture of how some of the clubs, but we know that's probably because of deep-pocketed owners.
Yeah, where are they getting that money from?
Yeah, and obviously that loan is going to have interest on it. So from a business perspective, that makes sense. And CVC haven't disappeared. I hadn't heard that name for a while, but apparently they're involved in this as well. So, they've not kind of packed up shop and left the Premiership to do nothing. So, there are some positives within it. It's not sustainable to be propping up a club to just keep them bumbling along as the team, let's face it, at the bottom of the table year in, year out, without putting something meaningful in. So that's my concern.
Look, I will, as an attempt to show as much optimism as possible, because we like to be an optimistic podcast.
We are a positive podcast.
And, we are both ostensibly fans of Falcons as a club, but as a club in Premiership Rugby. So what I will say is the fact that they have made the loan suggests to me that they at least think there must be a solution. Because if they thought it was hopeless, maybe they wouldn't have done it.
That's what I'm hoping to.
I mean, the other option is they were so desperate they thought there was no other way around it. But let's hope it's not that, and let's hope it's okay. It's a loan because we think we can recoup this, and there's a long-term plan here.
Well, can the other 9 clubs afford to lose Newcastle?
There is that. So I'll make a slight rallying call then, as rugby fans around the country. If you can, make a pilgrimage, travel up to Falcons, go and watch a game up there. Go and watch when your team travels away. Get yourself up there and watch it, and put some money behind the bar, and let's see if we can help Newcastle get out of the hole.
Yeah, because boy, they need it.
They do.
They certainly do. But that brings us on that rather lovely rally from Rory there to get behind the Falcons, which I fully endorse. That brings us to the end of episode 11 of the podcast. And you know what that means, Rory? When we come to the end of a podcast, what does it mean?
Song time.
It's song time. Here we are. That was episode 11 of the Rucks Balls Oval Balls podcast. Any final words, Rory? Well, they don't get much better than that. Come back next week.